It's now my pleasure to hand over to our next speaker, Adam Skinner. Adam is the Chief Consulting Officer at Deacon Consulting, and he'll be leading a session on the key differences between a program management office and a portfolio management office. So over to you, Adam.
Hi everyone. Thanks for giving me a bit of time to talk to you today about a subject that's quite close to my heart, which is the subject of portfolio management. Just to explain who I am in a bit more detail. Obviously, my name's Adam Skinner. I'm a Chief Consulting Officer at Deacon Consulting, which is a program procurement and commercial assurance consultancy based primarily in the UK. I also lead the Association for Project Management's interest group that focuses on portfolio management. So the portfolio used to be known as the Portfolio SIG. So I've written a number of chapters and quite a lot about portfolio management over my time and delivered. Now let me share some slides. Here we are. Apologies, I'm hugely familiar with Zoom, so let me just make sure I'm doing this properly. There we are. I think that should be working. Is that coming through now? Are you able to see that?
Yes, it is.
Wonderful. Okay, let me just sort out my other screen so it's all looking good. Let's see what everybody's saying and doing. 2 seconds. Trying to get this into the right size. There we are. Right. Okay. I think we're good to go. Okay. Lovely. So we're going to talk about today about how does the portfolio management office differ from the program management office. This presentation I call what's in a P, because we often sit there and say, okay, let's do a PMO. Let's build a PMO. We need a PMO. But people rarely think about what the P at the beginning of that PMO actually stands for. So as mentioned, my name's Adam Skinner. I'm Chief Consulting Officer here at Deacon Consulting. I've also led the APM Portfolio Interest Group and co-author of a number of guides on portfolio management. So what are we going to look at over the next half hour? Well, I'm going to talk you through 3 things really. Firstly, what does an office do in the context of program and the portfolio? Because I do think it's quite an interesting question. How do you define what a good office is, what a good office does? So we're going to spend a few minutes talking about that. We'll then actually look at some definitions and we'll try and say what's similar about the program office and the portfolio office, and more fundamentally, what's different, where do they differ? And if we can analyze where they differ, what does that mean in terms of the way we're going to work with them? And what does that mean with the different delivery methodologies that exist out there? How does that change what we do in the world of program and portfolio management? We're going to talk for about 25 minutes or so, and we'll try and save some time at the end for any questions. So let's crack on, shall we? So what makes a good program management office? Well, if you talk to PMOs, I should say, well, if you talk to lots of people, they'll talk about services. They'll talk about, well, prioritization or having good processes or good financial controls and plans and the like. And I think that's all good and that all makes sense. And it all sums up the things that occur in it, but it doesn't always define the value that you want to drop out of your office. There are a range of definitions for what that value might mean. I quite like this one here, which I've used for many years now. So for me, what does an office do? An office drives efficient and effective decision-making and assurance. Efficient and effective decision-making and assurance. Let's break that down a little bit more though. So what do we mean by efficient? So efficient is a word that's very, very overused, particularly in the world of kind of consulting and project management. I define something as efficient as if you can do it in a low cost, high speed, low chaos mode, i.e. something is more efficient if you can either do it for cheaper, do it faster, or do it with less chaos, i.e. simpler. Because actually simpler is always better. Simpler essentially drives up quality, it drives down errors, human errors, and it just generally has a better chance of working. So that's how I define the word efficient. Effective, though, is slightly different. So for me, effective is, does it have an impact? So an effective process, an effective thing, an effective activity generates large amounts of insight, with a low error rate, i.e. you've got less chance of the decision you're making going wrong, and that decision has high impact, i.e. it changes things in the real. So an office drives efficiency, it drives effectiveness around these two things. Decision making, and I class decision making as helping people at all levels in the project or program to make more accurate, faster choices to a lower data cost. In other words, it's more likely to be a decision that drives good behavior, more likely to be a decision that helps you make a quicker choice, and you can do it with less data, and let's say cleaner data as well. And that's how I define decision making. And I define assurance as it's allowing us to spotigate and mitigate risks with greater foresight, i.e. it's not happening tomorrow, we can see it a week's time, a month's time, 3 months' time, a year's time. And again, to that phrase, to a lower data cost. And data becomes really important because, of course, so much, in some ways, data is the currency that PMOs operate on. So actually being able to do stuff for less data makes that PMO more efficient and more effective. So an office drives efficiency and effectiveness around the two core activities of decision making, i.e. making better decisions, and assurance, i.e. spotting things that are likely to go wrong. And if you look at all the stuff that occurs in a PMO, as I say, strategic alignment, planning, dependency management, quality assurance, blah, 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 blah. All of those activities are really designed to try and tick one of those 4 boxes. We're doing it in an efficient fashion, we're doing it in an effective fashion, we're helping somebody make a decision faster, we're helping somebody spot something that is going wrong before it goes wrong. So if that's how we define, if that's what we think makes up a good PMO, why don't we start digging into what it means to be a program or a portfolio management office? So I'm a massive fan of definitions. I think words are important. I think actually starting on the same page with words is really important. So let's look at this definition for program management. This is, of course, the classic MSP, Managing Successful Programs, definition for program management. Program management is the action of coordinating, organizing, directing and implementing the temporary flexible organization that consists of a dossier of projects and transformational activities to achieve outcomes and realize benefits of strategic importance to the business. Whereas the portfolio management definition, and portfolio management is interesting because actually there's far more definitions out there, but I tend to rely on the APM's one, given had a hand in shaping it. Portfolio management, excuse me, is the selection, prioritization, and control of an organization's projects and programs in line with its strategic objectives and capacity to deliver. The goal is to balance change initiatives and business as usual while optimizing return on investment. This is a continuous process to achieve the evolving strategy of the organization. So why don't we start by looking at the similarities between program management and portfolio management? Well, there's a couple of really important similarities. So firstly, there's something really important here about coordination and control. Both program management and portfolio management have something to do with trying to make decisions, trying to see where things are, trying to direct projects and change activity. So coordination and control is in both of them. Projects are in both of them. Changes in both of them, really. They've definitely got something to do with change. And the third point, they both seem to have something to do with strategic objectives, don't they? So activities to achieve outcomes and realize benefits of strategic importance to the business, it's in program management, and in portfolio management, it's return on investments. So something to do with the investment, the value, the strategic objectives of the business. So there's a focus around coordination and control. There's a focus around change, projects, and there's a focus around strategy. Are we doing stuff that aligns with business strategy? So far, so similar. Why don't we have a look at the differences then? Because there are some really interesting differences. So what are the classic differences we're seeing? Well, program management doesn't really have a great deal to do with selection prioritization. Program management, you are coordinating, organizing, and directing the temporary and flexible organization that consists of a dossier of projects. So you're saying that you've been told these are the projects we're going to deliver, organize them and get them aligned. Whereas portfolio management, very critically, there is quite an important selection and prioritization. You're making a judgment call over what projects and programs to go forward with. Similarly, that ties into the balance and optimization point. So if you have to make a decision over which projects and programs to go ahead with, then you must be doing some sort of balancing, some sort of optimization. So there's an important decision function, portfolio management, right at the beginning to say what projects and what programs are we going ahead with. And the final point is something that actually often gets ignored, but I think is really important when it comes to thinking about change. It's the difference between permanent versus temporary. What do I mean by that? Well, a program management office is by definition a temporary organization. The words are in there. So implementing the temporary flexible organization. Program is a temporary structure that is supposed to deliver a specific change and then go away. Portfolio is not. So all organizations consistently change. They don't stop changing. As such, there needs to be a continual portfolio function, which is helping to select and prioritize and oversee that change. So the third really important difference between program management and portfolio management is the permanent nature of portfolio management compared to the temporary nature of program management. And that does sort of drive some really interesting factors. For instance, with a PMO, program management office, it needs to be set up as quickly as you can and delivering value as quickly as you can. With a portfolio management office, obviously it needs to be delivering value and making a difference from day one, but you have more time to build up its capability, more time to build up the value it's delivered. You also have the flip side, which is actually it's very helpful. It's very easy to keep people's focus on something that's temporary. There is a ticking clock. This thing is going to end. Whereas when something is permanent, like the portfolio office, keeping people engaged and excited about it can be quite challenging. So although it seems like a flowery line, the permanent versus temporary thing, it actually really does fundamentally drive how we humans engage with those two functions. So we talked a little bit about what's similar in the world of program management, and we talked a little bit about what's different in the world between program management and portfolio management. So let's take another step down and have a very specific look about what services, what things occur in the world of program management and the world of portfolio management. Now, I'm not intending to read through this list. You can read it just as easily as I can. But let me pull out some stuff that I do think is really quite important around this. So there's something here about kind of analytics and reporting. So at the program level, all those analytics is really clearly focused on what's going on in these individual projects and programs. However, at the portfolio level, there's an important thing where you're trying to align that portfolio with the strategic objectives of the business. So it's a much higher level analysis, and it's about the ultimate value and then outpourings from the projects and programs in line with the values of the business. Client dependency management, equally interesting fun. So in the program mode, you'll focus on the milestones of all your different projects and programs, the risks involved in there, and what's going to happen. Are they going to come together nicely? The portfolio level, yes, of course, you'll worry about milestones, but it's much more in line to the benefits that are dropping out of your programs and how they tie into the wider strategic plan. You also have this fascinating thing at the portfolio level, in that you are probably in the best place in the business to look at dependencies and to look at the damage that can be caused from bad dependency management. What I mean by that is actually if I'm sitting in a program, managing my program, I can't see all the other different many projects occurring. So it's very hard to work to manage dependencies between 2, 3, 4 different projects and programs. So none is kind of king, none sits above the others. Whereas at the portfolio level, I can generally see the wood for the trees because I'm sitting above the different projects and programs. So suddenly dependency management becomes a very incredibly powerful tool at that portfolio level. So I'm doing dependency management both at the program and the portfolio level, but I'm trying to get different outputs and there's different drivers. Similarly, risk and issue management at the program level is all focused around the delivery activity of your projects and programs. At the portfolio level, you're trying to look at systemic risks. You're trying to pull up 3 or 4 risks across those different programs and looking for alignments. For instance, if 3 of your programs are talking about a resource gap in a particular skill set, for instance, business analysis, the projects and programs themselves can't fix that. The portfolio level, though, can look to increase the resource activity of the business to bring in more BAs. So you're looking at those systemic risks that span across the entirety of the organization, and you're trying to break them down at the organizational level. Finance and resource management, similarly really interesting. You know, you're focused at the program level with the PMO. Actually, what's the cost driver of this business? Whereas at the portfolio level, you're looking at far more at the wider financial implications, the resource implications across the entire business. So scopes, analytics, planning, dependency, governance, stakeholder management, risk and issue, change control, blah, 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 blah. All of those things right down to benefit management. You are doing all those things in the program management office and the portfolio management office, just with a slightly different element. However, where it starts to get interesting, where you start to see real differences, is these bottom two services here: strategic planning and prioritization and optimization. Because the program management office doesn't really have those challenges. The program management office is given a business case, it's given an output value that needs to be delivered, it's given some cash to do that, it's given a series of projects to kick off with that should ideally do that. And the program's job is really to help those projects, manage those projects so that they deliver the values in a way, they deliver their output, in a way that can deliver the outcomes and the ultimate value. The program has been told the value it needs to deliver, it has to go and do that. Now, the portfolio is a very different activity. So the portfolio is both trying to do strategic planning, i.e. it's trying to look at the wider organization and trying to work out what change needs to land where to deliver the strategic goals of the business. And that's as much about the business's capability to manage all the change that's coming towards it, as it is around the business, its ability to kind of hit their milestone dates. But also it's trying to do this thing called prioritization and optimization. We're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but ultimately this is about saying, what projects and programs are we going to do? We could do anything in the world, but we obviously have a fixed cost budget, which are the right projects and programs to do. So there's really heavy focus on the portfolio office around the strategy and around the prioritization that's going to drive. So let me do a little bit more of a deep dive into that space around value. So if you recall on this previous page, we talked a lot about strategy and planning, which is really trying to work out that focus on value and that focus on how do we align the projects and programs to deliver the most. But how do we actually do that? So I call this, now this is, you've got a number of different titles, a number of different names based on the different organizations you're part of. But I tend to use the phrase portfolio optimization. So the portfolio management office continually prioritizes the initiatives that the organization do, stopping and starting projects and reallocating resource to meet the goals and optimize value. So as a portfolio office manager, I am looking at all the potential projects I can do. I'm trying to work out from each of those what their cost is, what the risk of the business of doing it is, and ultimately how achievable those things are. So actually, is it an easy thing to achieve, or is it going to cause us a real headache? On the flip side is trying to say, out of the actual strategic goals my organization has, how much of those strategic goals is this project and program going to deliver? So for instance, if I'm in a retail organization, I may be wanting to improve footfall at my stores, while also improving pass-through rate from the organizational app. If I'm in a government organization, it may be more focused around the security of citizens and the popularity of the offerings we're kind of trying to make. So what I'm trying to do is essentially saying there are all these potential projects I could be delivering based on the value these get aligned to the priorities of the business. Which ones will it be doing? I'm taking the cost, I'm taking the risk, I'm taking the achievability, and balancing those out in a nice big spreadsheet and then working with the senior stakeholders to work out which ones to do. At the program management office, I'm managing the costs and risks to deliver the desired program outcomes and visions, usually at the program level. So essentially, at the program level, I've been told which value they want me to optimize, they want me to deliver. So I'm running this program to increase footfall at stores. I'm running this program to increase pass-through rates from the app. And then within the boundaries of that value I'm trying to deliver, I balance out all of my different projects. I balance out the cost, the risk. I try and minimize the risk. I try and ultimately to get to the place where I am delivering those benefits. So a very different focus, whether I'm operating around value at the portfolio level or whether I'm operating around value at the program level. Now there are a number of different models for how you do portfolio management. This is the APMs. So if I take you through this step by step, as I say, when I'm delivering my portfolio, when I'm running portfolio management, I start with vision, i.e. as a business, we want to increase our size to this and we're going to do it by this. Then that drives out the corporate goal. So if I want to drive numbers to this kind of level, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to expand into Europe. Well, we're going to open up a new website here. Well, we're going to bring in a new CRM system, which is going to drive our ability to really well target customers, blah, blah, blah. Those, therefore, create the strategic plan. So if I'm sitting there with a strategic plan with a number of major drivers and major goals, then I will construct and prioritize my portfolio based on all the different ideas that have come out, all the different potential stuff that we could be doing, and balancing all of that thing out to try and create a optimized, balanced portfolio. And then in that portfolio governance cycle, we're trying to deliver that portfolio. I'm reviewing the portfolio. I'm getting feedback in terms of how things are going, so assessing for performance. New ideas are coming out, which are getting pumped back into the strategic plan at the beginning. And then we have this virtual circle of this portfolio continuously being optimizing and growing. Meanwhile, we are trying to deliver the portfolio. So at the top, you have that function, which is around trying to make sure the portfolio is right-sized. And at the bottom, you have the delivery aspect of the portfolio. How am I looking down from my portfolio view into the programs and projects, and how am I checking that things are going well, and how am I helping them to deliver? And again, that's where the dependency management, the risk management, the resourcing becomes so important. So I'm trying to use my portfolio level view to help increase the delivery confidence of those projects and those programs. So when I'm sitting at the portfolio, when I'm doing my portfolio governance and running my portfolio, I'm doing two fundamental things. Two, if you like, two big services. Portfolio optimization, which is the continuing act of trying to make sure that the portfolio is right-sized, delivering the benefits and the goals of the business, aligned to the vision of the corporate strategy, and assured, if that portfolio we're trying to deliver, we're delivering it in the best way, minimizing risk, increasing delivery confidence. And I call that portfolio optimization and portfolio assurance. And you can see a similar model here between what happens at the portfolio and the program level. So the portfolio, I'm doing portfolio optimization and portfolio assurance. At the program level, I'm doing program delivery, i.e. trying to make those daily decisions based on what I'm seeing that help drive the program forward. And program assurance, i.e. trying to spot what's likely to be going wrong in the next 6 months, 3 months, 2 months, 1 month, whatever. Optimization assurance, program delivery, program assurance. And in a nutshell, for me, that's the fundamental difference between the world of portfolio management offices and program management offices. We're both trying to deliver change successfully. In the portfolio management office, I am doing the portfolio optimization activity. And I'm doing a level of assurance, which is occurring at the portfolio level, higher up, which is focused more around dependency and risk. And at the program level, I'm focused down much more into delivering the benefits and the value, and similarly assuring those projects by spotting things that are going wrong across the projects and managing dependencies between the projects. I've got a few more minutes, so I'm going to talk about one final thing that's really important. And for me, that's the mindset difference that occurs between the program and the portfolio level. And again, this comes back to the time concepts we were talking about before. I think there's something very important about the fact that programs are linear. They have a beginning, they have a middle, they have an end. And they really should be something where you could be relatively reductionist. You should be breaking it down into small parts and able to say, if we put all these projects together, is it going to be successful? Should be a high degree of predictability. You should have clear boundaries over what's happening. And this should be relatively low complexity, ho-ho, and independencies. I.e., you should be able to look at those different projects and say, if these things come together, this value will be delivered. Value in terms of the office, therefore, is actually around having a structured process and a good methodology to drive out those clear boundaries and to drive out the risks. Portfolio management is slightly different because actually it's driven by the concept of value. And value is spectacularly subjective and flexes based on who sits at the C-suite and the senior stakeholders. So there's far less predictability in this space. It's much more fuzzy about what people want. And stakeholder perception is absolutely imperative. So the portfolio level is far more what I said, well, thinking in wheels. It's all about trying to find an optimal solution that works out for the senior stakeholders you are engaging with. For instance, there's no point working around the C-suite and getting them all in one room if you can't work out what they think value looks like. Far more often than not, you'll be presenting something from this, it will have fuzzy edges, you'll be having to convince them that that's the right way to go based on the data and the idea you've got. So value in the world of portfolio management is much more about people, much more about understanding stakeholders, and much more finding creative solutions to the problems you're going to see. I mean, that draws a very different way of structuring yourself. So for me, the program management office is very much about that structure, very much about that discipline. Yes, that's important with portfolio office, but equally, if not more important, is one's ability to work with complex stakeholder communities and to find solutions that work for them. I'm going to touch very, very quickly on delivery methods. And I do like to do this because actually we talk a lot about waterfall, and portfolio management is traditionally a waterfall thing, but actually we talk more and more these days about agile and the world of the agile portfolio. And that's quite hard because at agile, you're trying to drive value to the lowest level, i.e. to the delivery vehicle. And you're expecting people at that level to make, what's essentially portfolio decisions about what the right thing to do for those individual projects are to maximize value. Some people even argue there's no such thing as the portfolio level agile conversation. I actually don't think that's true. And I think there are changes, but you still need to be really clear at the portfolio about what value looks like. So for me, if you're delivering an agile capability, an agile product stream, there is a portfolio capability. That portfolio, though, is far more about trying to define what value means in the context of the business you're in, and then enabling people at the lowest level to make decisions that are aligned with that agile view. For instance, helping people understand what the value, or what the priorities are for the business in terms of cost reduction, in terms of driving up sales, in terms of whatever it is. But those real classic guide rails around what good looks like, and then allowing that to flow down to the lowest level so people at that product stream level can make appropriate decisions within the funding budgets they've got. It's all about decentralization of the decision making and flowing down the decision capability. So I've got a couple more minutes. Let me just close out then with what I think are the 6 core behaviors for really good portfolio offices. 6 core things that I always say are fundamental in terms of being successful. Again, hopefully you've got the message that value is absolutely critical here in portfolio space. Value, value, value. If you can't define value from your business's perspective, you aren't even off the starting blocks. So make sure you're able to define value, make sure you work clearly with senior stakeholders who own that value, usually the C-suite, working with them to define what value is. There is a real habit for people to review the portfolio continuously, to review it annually. Once a year, we're going to take a cut and say, this is what the portfolio should look like. I think that's a very bad thing to do. I think you should be trying to do it at least quarterly and trying to rebalance it because the world moves faster and faster and faster. Portfolio management is all about the business, and therefore you need to make sure you aren't just talking to people in the project world. You need to be talking to the C-suite. You need to be talking to the business. You need to be making sure you've got the right people joined into your governance to make sure you can make decisions. You need to clearly and consistently demonstrate the value that portfolio is delivering as a permanent function. People get bored of it, so you have to continually be showing what's happening. You need to be continually encouraging innovation and creativity. And finally, it's all about collaboration. It's all about stakeholder engagement. Really, far more than the program management office, the portfolio management office has to be seen as the voice of the business, the voice of value in the organization. That only comes by if everybody agrees that it's got a good voice, it's saying the right thing, and it is empowered both to start and to stop. So that, for me, is in a nutshell, is what the portfolio office should be doing, how it differs between a program and portfolio, and how some of the delivery methodologies impact on it. I think I've got a few minutes for questions, so let me hand back to you, Rita, with that.
Thank you so much, Adam, for helping us better understand the difference between a program and portfolio management office and how it impacts our PMO. Actually, there is a question for you, and it is, how do you recommend handling conflicts when a portfolio strategic objectives clash with individual program priorities?
Oh gosh, I mean, stakeholder management is really all about aligning to stakeholder management. Sorry, apologies. Portfolio management is all about making sure the stakeholders are aligned. So, I mean, when you have that clash, you really have to go back to first principles, which is what is the value we're trying to deliver here? Which decision really drives that value, and which decision has the widest agreement from the kind of higher level stakeholdership community? So go back to the basics around what the clash is, work out where the value is, where the cost implications are of that particular decision, and then take a clear decision with clear recommendations back into the governance, making sure you're speaking to the relevant owners and, of course, the business who are impacted by it. That would be my top tip.
Thank you, Adam. There is one more question. What are the key skills or competencies PMO professionals should develop to stay relevant in a more strategic portfolio PMO model?
Yeah, I mean, I always say two, really. I mean, stakeholder management is so critical. And actually, one of the challenges of becoming a portfolio manager is it differs from being a project and program management. It's far more about working cleanly with senior figures and kind of keeping them aligned and keeping them happy. So really work on that senior stakeholder engagement. And the second thing I'd say, and I say this to everybody, no matter which office you're in, is actually make sure you've got a grip on modern technology skills such as low code. And of course, the IA revolution. But I'd start with low code. Make sure you can build your Power Automate systems. Make sure you can automate your process and the like. Because if you're looking for something that drives efficiency and effectiveness, that's easily the strongest tool. So those are my two.